Welcome to another How Conversation. We are really excited to have this particular engagement with Honorable former Congresswoman, now President of the University of Texas, El Paso, Heather Wilson.
Wonderful to be with you.
Fortunately, you have so many great accomplishments, but I'm going to hit a few of the highlights for our listeners. First and foremost, the 24th Secretary of the Air Force from 2017 to 2019, and the first Air Force Academy graduate to hold that position, as well as being part of a time when there were just women starting at the Air Force Academy. You were in the third class, graduating in 1982, and trained me. So I am very grateful for your leadership.
Sorry, Dana.
You did your best, ma'am. And we try not to disappoint. Then after your service in the Air Force, stood up a company called Keystone International, and then also served as a senior advisor to a lot of our industrial labs, national laboratories. You're also the first woman veteran elected to the full term in Congress, and the second woman from New Mexico. Ma'am, it is just really an incredible honor to have you with us today.
It's wonderful to be with you, Dana.
Yes, and we see you've got your UTEP in the background. I also failed to mention, but you've been a president of a university before, being the president of South Dakota School of Mines and Technology. So we're going to go into your leadership, ma'am, and talk about, first and foremost, all these positions that you've had in this varied lifetime of service. What kind of tools do you carry, or what kind of tools have you found to be incredibly valuable in your toolkit as a leader?
It's interesting. As I've gotten more senior, I think things have become more clear to me about the importance of the fundamentals. Values driven, and we can talk about that a little bit, but mission focused. So if an institution is wasting time on something other than the mission, that's probably really is wasting time. And then people oriented, because no matter how technical your organization, you get things done through and with people. So all of the institutions that I've led and they've been varied, those things remain constant. What's the mission? Are we acting in accordance with our values? And take care of your people.
Now, you got some wisdom from your father, I understand, as well, in terms of the use of tools.
So my dad, you're right, my dad enlisted in the Air Force, then he came back home. So he was both a pilot and a mechanic. And we lived on the end of this in a very small town in New Hampshire, and we were the last house on the road, and there was this truck that would come about every month, big red truck with a box, big box truck on the back of it. And it was the Snap-on Tools guy. And that was at a time when they still had traveling salesmen, And so the Snap-on Tools guy would come and he'd pull into our yard. And my dad, who spent a lot of time out in the garage working on his cars, came out to talk to him. They'd get to the end of that conversation. My dad would, pull out his wallet and they'd buy some tool from the Snap-on guy. And he'd go into the garage and he'd throw it in his toolbox. Sometimes, usually, actually all the time, he didn't really need that tool today. But he was just getting a tool and putting it in his box that he'd need someday. He also was building a relationship with the guy who sold the tools. And he knew he could get something from him if he needed him, and that he'd drive all the way out there to the end of our road just to help my dad. But my dad had tools when he needed them. I always think about that when I'm thinking about a problem. What are the tools I have in my box that I might have gotten from some other place or time that I can use on a particular problem? And it's important to just keep putting tools in your box, even if you don't need them today.
Wonder if you'd talk with us a little bit about, again, going back to your varied career and the different roles that you've had, how important, both garnering trust and giving trust is in terms of working with people, especially when you have philosophical or moral disagreements.
So building relationships of trust over time is one of the most important things you can do as a leader. And it's one of the things, particularly most people now it's not as a very few people start in the same organization and stay in that organization for their lifetimes. So you're very often moving around, or at least moving around in the same organization. Over time, those relationships of trust and that network of trust that radiates out from you and with others is invaluable. Because when things get really hard, if I know someone who I believe is competent and they've given me their word, I don't need anything else. And they can make things happen in really difficult times. And so trust isn't something that's given, it's earned, and it's earned by doing what you say you're going to do. Or if you can't, coming back to a person and saying, look, I can't get that done on that timeline. This is why, and this is what I recommend we do instead. And just being always that person who's gonna tell somebody the straight story. And you may do it in a kind way, but it's just invaluable. There's nothing better.
Wow. Well, that puts a premier price tag on something that's incredibly important for us as moral leaders. And
Dana, you said something else there that I think is also important. How do you build trust with people you disagree with?
Right.
You look at Congress and you think, oh gosh, how could you stand to work there or something? Here's an interesting reality. Relationships of trust in the Congress are actually quite important, even and especially when you disagree. So if somebody asks me how I'm going to vote on something, and I tell them something, but then I change my mind, I better tell them I've changed my mind, because the worst thing you can have in the Congress is a reputation for duplicity, because nobody will trust you and almost no one will work with you. So it's more important to be straight and to say, look, I'm just not with you on this one, or I can't work with you on this, but here's something else that's close. And if you can move in that direction, I may be able to agree with you on that.
How do you afford others trust? What are some specific behaviors where you trust in others? And also, how do you persuade what behaviors might garner trust from others?
I think the best, and I'll give you an example. Just recently, we had an unauthorized computer intrusion here on campus. I have a new vice president, very competent, promoted from within, who's getting used to being a vice president, a really great guy. And I said, look, focus on the job, keep me updated a couple of times a day. But I'm not going to micromanage you. I don't add value to what you got to do today. I know that. But if you need top cover or you need resources, I'm here. And our relationship is much closer and much deeper today than it was 2 months ago, because I trusted him. I let him do his job. And I actually did have to give him top cover, and he knows it. When, I'm sure you're aware of these kind of situations, Dana, where, higher headquarters staff has a better idea and they've got an 800-mile screwdriver. And I at one point had to kind of call in and just say, look, I'm the one accountable for this campus. If you want to hold somebody accountable, or if you're worried you're going to be thrown under the bus, you won't. I'm responsible. You call me if you think you need something from us, because we're not going to play this game. And they knocked it off. But that created a level of trust between my vice president and I that I think is different today than it was 2 months ago.
What is a framework or a way that you approach these, what can be very divisive times that do cause us to sometimes emote?
Yeah.
What is a framework that you approach those kinds of conversations with?
Well, I'm pretty self-critical on myself on these things, and I probably need to take more deep breaths before I react to some things in the moment. I'm not a screamer or a yeller or those kind of things, but I am direct. If somebody is not behaving appropriately, I just say, look, we just can't do this way. And relationships of trust among a group is also important. Most organizations have some form of, senior leadership team or something like that. If there's not trust in all of the relationships there, if we can't put a problem on the table and just say, golly, what do y'all think? Or how can we fix this? Or what's the best path forward among choices? And really have a difficult conversation and bring different views to the fore and respect each other. I think we've all been in organizations where those conversations aren't real, and then somebody else makes a decision in a back room or something, and it just doesn't work. But those are respectful conversations, knowing that everybody brings something different to the table.
That's you mentioned so many wonderful things in that answer in terms of talking about respect for all people, treating people with respect and dignity, seeing that people bring their distinctive value. And that kind of curiosity that you bring into these difficult or courageous conversations is so important. You once said, as a leader, it is most important to think about what are the right questions, not just what are the answers to the quiz that somebody else set for us to think. What did you mean by that?
A lot of times people, and I find this true at more junior levels, they're thinking tactically. They're thinking of, okay, this is the work that I have to get done today. My boss gave me this work that I have to get done today. And they're not thinking about what is the right work to do. And as you get more senior, that question is more and more important, because there's always more to be done than you have time or resources to accomplish. So what's the most important thing? And framing, and that's particularly true in the policy realm. The most important decisions take the Congress or for the President of the United States are not how am I going to vote, yes or no, on this issue? It's what's the agenda? And what's the map? And then you can figure out what you're going to do on individual steps. So it's really the setting of the agenda that's the most important thing.
I'd like to go back to the time that you became the president of the University of Texas, El Paso, 2019, right before the pandemic. What did you, I guess, refine in terms of your understanding of leadership, leading through such a difficult, tumultuous, challenging time for many, but for you as a brand new university president?
I have a nameplate on my desk. It was given to me in my last college presidency, but I've kept it, and I actually kept it in the Pentagon as well, because it doesn't say my name. It doesn't say university president. It says, "You're kidding me, right?" Because that was my most, when you're that, and it doesn't matter if it's a university, any organization that you're a leader of that has any significant number of people, probably once a week, people will walk in and say, Dr. Wilson, there's something you need to know. And the only appropriate answer is, you're kidding me, right? And so 2020 and early 2021 was kind of a "you're kidding me, right" year. But I think, so first of all, universities don't change quickly. They're not known for being agile. I think as a society, there are some advantages to that, actually. About stable institutions. But one of the things we all learned was that if you don't have a choice, you can dance. If you have to be agile, you can. That was liberating in a way that I think was really useful for leaders at the university. If we had planned for 5 years to even get 20% of our classes distance enabled, it never would have happened. Yeah. But when we didn't have a choice, we became a completely virtual university in 10 days. Everything, completely virtual.
You seem to, you talk about it, I mean, you clearly have competence and confidence that you have built over your years, but you also have this, the more I know, the more I know I don't know, humility that leans you into listening and learning that your toolbox is your toolbox to use, but also others have toolboxes too that might have tools that you need. And after the Capitol riot in DC on the 6th of January, You made a wonderful statement that I think is descriptive of that approach you have. If I can share that with our listeners. Mm. You said we must begin to restore our ability to listen to each other, not listening to refute or to shame, but listening to understand with an open mind and the loving hearts of countrymen. And we're in such a divisive time, and that is such a fantastic quote about listening. Mm-hmm. And I'm wondering, give us some advice on how do we get to practice or create more loving hearts for listening as we're facing some of these wicked challenges that we have nationally and globally.
That was, I think for a lot of us, it was just an extremely sad day, a hard day for anyone who has served in government in any way. One of the things that I think is a downside of this tremendous explosion of information from all different kinds of sources is that we're actually segmenting more from each other. We listen to things that reaffirm our own ideas. And we very rarely listen to people who disagree with us or sources of information that are, and those who are giving information are also tailoring that information for a particular segment of a broad audience. And I think that tends to solidify people's views and not cause them to question their own views with humility. And you have to go into a conversation with the people you don't agree with, knowing that, something, I might not be right about this. I might not be right. And I better keep learning.
Well, one question I'd like to ask you, because our founder and our executive chairman, Dov Seidman, talks about how important a pause is. How do we reimagine and recharge? Because when we turn off a machine, it goes off. When we turn off us as humans to take this moment, we actually get maybe recharged. How is it that you recharge?
My family is really important to me. And so spending time with my family is really important to me and always recharges my batteries. The irony is I have two really extroverted kids. I don't know where that comes from because my husband and I are both introverts. So I get a certain vicarious pleasure out of that. I love to read, love to walk and hike, and I do fly my little airplane on the weekends if the weather's good. And so those things kind of recharge me and also give me new perspective, particularly reading widely. With respect to flying, I love to see the world from about 3,000 feet. And it gets me away. I love the smell of a hangar. I grew up around aviators. It's just relaxing to me to just, that may seem odd, but it's a childhood feeling that's just relaxing to me. And you just get to see the world and do something physical that's completely different from what I normally do as an executive.
President Wilson, one question I'd like to ask you for our listeners who are around the globe and at many different levels, what would you say is an important attribute, maybe even one that's become more important over the years for exercising moral leadership?
When I was a younger leader, I wasn't as focused on my relationships with others. I was more about focused on the job. We got a job to do, very kind of mission focused, I guess. But the relationships over time and the stewardship of those relationships really matters. And so I probably pay a little more attention to that now, and just trying to connect with peers and people and folks who can help you figure out problems or whose advice they can give you. So I spent a little more time on those relationships, and I probably would have benefited if I'd done that for 30 years rather than just the last 10.
So relationships coming back to and that trust that we talked about earlier. And I think that is something that answers both questions that I asked. And it has been a distinct honor to be able to interview President of the University of Texas, El Paso, former Secretary of the Air Force, former Congresswoman, former President of another university, Air Force Academy graduate, friend and colleague. Thank you so much for sharing your power and grace for our How Conversation on Moral Leadership. For our listeners, we applaud you and we wish you well in your continued moral leadership journey. Thank you very much.
Thank you, Dana.